Hi, and welcome to another edition of A Better Day, A Better Life, the show that brings you wellness, personal development, and spiritual growth topics and tips and information to help you have a better day and live a better life. I'm your host, Debbie Givens, and today's topic is a big one. You'll always see it in the news. It is sugar. Sugar, sugar, sugar. It's in a lot of our foods. It's in some foods that you don't normally think have sugar. And the question is sugar good for us or not? What kind of sugar is good for us, and can we avoid sugar? And with me on the show is Paul Ortiz. He's practically a co-host now. He's been here with me for several segments. Paul Ortiz, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Debbie. Thank you.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about sugar. You and I have spoken about this before, and we knew we had to do a show on sugar. And sugar is a big deal. There are articles daily, weekly about sugar. A gentleman here, an author I'll mention to you, a doctor, wrote a book about sugar and the whole idea of detoxing from sugar. So sugar is a pretty big topic, and it's a pretty big part of what we eat, unfortunately. Let's start with natural sugar. First of all, sugar is also known as sucrose.
Right.
And you're going to hear the other words referring to some types of sugar that also end in the OSE, the OS, and they're not necessarily natural sugar. So let's start with natural sugar. Honey is considered a natural sugar, and you were saying something to me about honey. There's a difference between
Right.
Organic honey?
Exactly, and there's refined honey, honey that's been filtered and heated. So when you do your homework and your research and you use honey, because honey is not really a sweetener as we think it is. It could be used as a sweetener, but honey is really a food. It's really a food that people have used since ancient times to heal themselves.
Right. I understand it's definitely something great for
different illnesses.
Diseases, and particularly inflammation, and we're going to talk about that later, the fact that a lot of diseases are considered inflammation, or they stem from inflammation. So that's really a key subtopic of sugar, and I'm talking about something like honey, which is a natural healer.
And you can use it externally also, for burns and for cuts and things of that nature. Honey is not the regular syrupy thing that we think it is. Honey is it's a very interesting food source that's used for healing.
Okay, so it's more than a nutrient. Molasses, also syrupy.
Blackstrap molasses.
Okay, and specifically, as opposed to brown molasses. Maple syrup, my favorite sugar.
Exactly.
Because I'm such a big pancake fan. And then there's a couple of relatively new natural sugars that we want to talk about. Stevia and agave.
Right.
I've been told is a great sugar. I don't want to use the word substitute, because we're going to get to the substitutes that manufacturers are using for in place of real natural but refined sugar. Before we talk about the effects and sugar and whatnot, artificial sweeteners. Okay, there are people who cannot have pure or regular sugar, cane sugar, beet sugar, and they must resort to something that's artificially sweetened. Now, sugar has calories, the artificial sweeteners don't, and some people might switch to that anyway just because they're trying to save on calories.
Right.
But artificial sweeteners do have their caveats.
Exactly.
First of all, we have saccharin, and people are taking in as sweet and low. Which is aspartame, which is what Equal and NutraSweet contain. And then there's sucralose, and that's actually short for a longer word that I will explain to the viewers later when we talk about the story with Splenda. But Splenda is sucralose, and obviously they've been trying to market themselves as being just like sugar, which is not the case. So then, and that's what people are putting on their cereal. They're putting it in their tea and coffee, and they are also buying foods that are drinks and beverages that are made with that instead of sugar.
And they're giving it to their children.
So now I want to quickly jump, though, to the additives, the substitutes that manufacturers have been using in foods that manufactured foods that we eat, processed foods that we eat, and that is dextrose, and the big one, high fructose corn syrup. I run every time I hear I hear that, and I'm surprised in some the foods that it does appear in. I'm starting to read the labels. We should all be reading the labels of the food that we purchase in the supermarket,
Exactly.
and be leery of high fructose corn syrup. Do you want to say something about the high fructose corn syrup?
High fructose corn syrup is something that I heard a buddy of mine has been doing a lot of research on it, and he shared some information with me. He said it was being developed by scientists back in the 50s or the 40s or the 60s, but it finally came out into the market in the 70s.
Right,
In the
right.
70s. So my question is, when he gave me some information and we were discussing, the research that the average person doesn't do on high fructose corn syrup, when I was a child, I would also indulge in soda, candy, cake, and things of that nature.
And fruit juices.
And fruit juices, but it had, natural sugar in it or brown sugar. But, somewhere along the line, the industry decided that they want to produce this chemical because high fructose corn syrup is really a chemical, and it's an addictive chemical. And when we did the research, we discovered that high fructose corn syrup has the ability to interfere with the communication between your stomach and your brain. When I was a child, I was taught, if we give you some candy, we give you some soda, some cake, you're not supposed to eat it all in one day. And if you follow your natural rhythms and your natural intelligence of the body and you listen to it, your body will tell you when to stop drinking soda or when to stop eating candy or when to stop eating cake or ice cream, because there's a limit to everything.
Right.
Now, high fructose corn syrup, from what we discovered, has the ability to bypass the mechanism in the brain to tell you when to stop eating this sweetness.
I think I read that somewhere. In fact, there's a major article. I found this in the New York Times. It was published back on April 13th, 2011, written by Gary Taubes, and it's titled, "Is Sugar Toxic?" Is sugar toxic? And
It is.
And it is, and it's addictive. And this is what he points to a lecture given by Robert Lustig back on May 26, 2009. His lecture was called "Sugar: The Bitter Truth," and it was posted on YouTube by someone a couple of months later, and since then it's been viewed over 800,000 times.
Wow.
And it gains new viewers at a rate of 50,000 a month.
Wow.
Mr. Robert Lustig is considered a specialist on pediatric hormone disorders, and he's a leading expert in child obesity at the University of California in San Francisco, their School of Medicine. And that's considered one of the best medical schools in the country. And he has impressive credentials, so people listen to him.
Yeah.
And he uses terms like toxin and poison when he talks about sugar.
Exactly.
And in this lecture, he even goes as far as calling it evil.
Because it interferes with so many different natural body processes. It's refined, and it's not even sugar. It's a chemical is what it is, but they call it sugar.
Well, he's talking about all sugar. He says by sugar, Lustig means not only the white granulated stuff that we've been putting in our coffee and sprinkling on our cereal, which is technically known as sucrose, as I said before, but also high fructose corn syrup, which has already become, even without Dr. Lustig's help, which he calls the most demonized additive additive known to mankind.
Exactly. It's in everything. They put it in everything. What you would least expect, it's in there. Even if you read the label and you don't see it on the label, the government allows the food manufacturers to put ingredients and components and chemicals in the food and not necessarily put it on the label. So they have that freedom, that leeway to do that.
Part of this article mentions that the soda companies, the soda manufacturers, substituted real sugar with this high fructose corn syrup back in the 70s, and touting that it was just as healthy as regular sugar, and most people didn't know the difference, at that time, and so everybody bought into it, But now, I think in the past few years, it has come to our attention about high fructose corn syrup,
the dangers and the toxicity of it,
and we're all now searching for foods,
alternatives,
or foods that claim they don't have it. They finally took it out of some cranberry juices. I drink cranberry juice on a regular basis, and I learned to look to see which ones have it and which ones don't, and obviously select the ones that don't, and went back to having regular sugar. But it's high fructose corn syrup has become a big deal. because already we have this excessive consumption of sugar. It's been cited as the primary reason that the numbers of obesity and
exactly.
and diabetes
has increased
in America
at alarming rates. Exactly.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, and it's also the likely dietary cause of several chronic ailments that we have, due to our Western lifestyle, heart disease, hypertension, and many of the different types of cancers.
Exactly. And sugar also, when I studied sugar years ago, sugar is responsible for the depletion of certain vitamins and minerals and nutrients in the body because it's not natural, it's a chemical. So then the body has to waste nutrients and energy and substances to eliminate this chemical out of the body. So in doing that, that's how your body becomes depleted of certain vitamins, minerals, proteins, and many other nutrients that flow throughout organs, glands, and systems.
And actually, sugar isn't a nutrient, and that's the problem.
Exactly.
So whether we get it artificially or we get the natural, to some degree, when we get into the argument, because we're first talking about natural sugar versus artificial sweeteners and then the additives. But when we get down to it, too much sugar isn't good, period.
Exactly.
Whether it's natural or not.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of organizations that are advising us to cut down on sugar consumption. There's a couple of scientists in my report here and the article here that avoid sugar altogether.
Exactly.
I don't know how they're doing that because unless they're making their own food, and that's
right.
And I think that we as a society need to go back to making our own meals, making our own food.
Exactly, not using processed, canned, bottled, packaged food, because
Right.
that's where they put the sugar and all the chemicals and additives. But if you stick more to a natural diet, that's not prepackaged, then you can avoid the sugar and the chemicals and so on and so forth.
Basically raw foods, because
exactly.
I'm delighting in the fact that I have vegetables in the house right now, but I bought frozen vegetables. I did buy the type that don't have sauces or anything else added to it. It's just leaf spinach that's been frozen with water and cooked and whatnot. But that could have sugar in it. You'd be surprised at items that end up with sugar in it that don't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily have sugar. I thought a hot dog bun or hamburger buns, I don't understand why they have sugar in them.
No, because sugar, they make money. Anytime they invent a chemical, they have to put it somewhere and they have to sell it to somebody because it promises big dividends and big revenues.
But hot dogs have sugar. I mean, I'm just amazed at, everybody thinks it's cereals. Okay, so you just get a cereal that says it doesn't have sugar in it. You're getting corn flakes and Cheerios, but those have sugar in it too.
Yeah. Like I said, the government allows the manufacturers, the food industry, to place certain chemicals and ingredients in the prepackaged foods that we buy and consume because they want to make the money, and there's big billions of dollars is made putting all kinds of chemicals in the foods, in the prepackaged foods that don't belong there.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, potato chips could end up with
yeah,
chips and some.
And then they also talk about potato chips. How about that?
Popcorn.
That oil, the trans fats.
Yeah.
That's from an industry that has to do with machinery and things of that nature. What is an oil or a chemical from an industry doing, from a machine industry doing in the food industry? How does that happen? How does that cross over like that?
Well, let's talk about what sugar does to the body. Let's just talk about what you can see, which is tooth decay.
Exactly.
And so, like you said, the government allowing these manufacturers to put the sugar in our food, and then we have to have, because the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is concerned about our teeth. We've got fluoride in our water and in our toothpaste to combat tooth decay. So in between the foods that are laden with sugar and then our water and our toothpaste, which is laden with fluoride to prevent or abate tooth decay. And if we, this show started out being a case for not consuming, artificial and additive sugars, but basically you could make the case that we shouldn't be eating sugar at all.
Exactly.
Now there are some natural things that we talked about in other shows, that have antioxidants and proteins and other nutrients that we should have that actually contain sugar. So you're kind of at a crossroads where, do I eat fresh fruit because it has antioxidants in it and it's, and whatnot and stuff, but then know that I shouldn't be consuming sugar, You know,
The
for
synthetic
my
sugar, exactly. Avoid the synthetic sugar.
right. So it's so there's so there's two issues here. But let's go back to what sugar does to the body. Period. Regardless, obesity
Exactly.
is being blamed on it, and it goes extensively in this article from the New York Times, written by Gary Taubes, excuse me. And then inflammation.
Exactly.
Now, inflammation is considered the base of most diseases and cancers, and even what we go through. Condition-wise, it doesn't have to be a disease. Body aches and pains, congestion,
strange symptoms that even the doctors don't understand.
indigestion, frequent infections, and it could cause advanced aging. Some people look older than their age.
Exactly.
Arthritis, and arthritis setting in early, and weight gain. I mean, sugar, inflammation is the cause, the root of many of the things that we suffer.
Exactly.
Sugar. The question that is being asked here is, can sugar be as bad as it sounds like it?
Yes, definitely, especially if it's refined. Anything refined, anything artificial that has synthetic molecules, and you consume that and it goes through the cells, the body's cells cannot absorb it, digest it, or assimilate it. So anything artificial, anything synthetic is going to have a detrimental effect on the body.
Now, there are many articles that address the artificial sweeteners having that effect. Here's an article on artificial sweeteners. They may boost the blood sugar. There's a study, and there's another study that says artificial sweeteners can disrupt the body's controls for blood sugar. As you mentioned earlier, I'm going to drink 16 ounces of soda, and because it has that high fructose corn syrup, I don't get the idea to stop drinking the soda. Right, and so I'm drinking more and more soda.
Exactly.
And that's what they want. That's what they want from us.
And the soda also has caffeine, so we're not even talking about the caffeine yet. We're just talking about the sugar.
Yeah, which is doing the most damage
Exactly.
here. Apparently, and that's what Robert Lustig and even Gary Taubes, who wrote this article back on April 13th, 2011. You can find that on the NewYorkTimes.com website. It's quite an extensive article, and it makes some good cases. You can tell from the language that Gary uses that he finds that Robert Lustig's lecture and his premises on sugar is plausible and can be taken as fact.
Yeah, they've done research on it. They've done research, and they've done studies and investigations, scientific investigations that proves it. Because think about it, before we had all these artificial sugars, we didn't have all these illnesses and diseases, and we didn't have all this obesity. When I was a child, everybody had a sweet tooth, but it was natural sugar that was in the ice cream, the cake, the candy, the soda, so on and so forth.
And foods used to be made from scratch, and now
Exactly.
we're buying things that are already made.
We also had prepackaged food in cans and bottles and packages, but not as much as we have today. I guess at least half of the stuff that we consume is prepackaged. And that's not natural. That's not normal. That's not normal.
Okay, so let's get back to the whole thing with sugar and blood sugar and diabetes. There's in these studies, what they're finding I'm just talking about artificial sweeteners. They say that these people end up with a higher blood sugar level, and it's interesting because there's no correlation between calories and your blood sugar level. And your blood sugar level comes from consuming foods that have carbohydrates, and carbohydrates get converted into sugar that gets in the blood. But sugar is already sugar, so it doesn't need to be broken down, but it doesn't get processed either. When it doesn't. So artificial sweeteners have a negative effect on your metabolism.
That would lead to the excess levels of sugar in the bloodstream.
So they were trying to make a correlation between ingesting these artificial sweeteners and saying that it bypasses the controls that the body has. The body, when it senses blood sugar in the blood, it releases insulin from the liver, and that's supposed to bring it down.
Exactly.
But if you use artificial sweeteners, the body doesn't get that message, and so you've got an elevated blood sugar level.
Continuously, constantly. And then also the other problem with that is that the pancreas is the organ that's in charge of regulating the blood sugar, whether it's too high.
Oh, sorry, I said the liver, didn't I?
It lowers it, and when it's too low, it raises it.
Right.
But the artificial sugar is so toxic that after a while the pancreas becomes exhausted. It's like if you overuse caffeine and you drink too much coffee, then eventually the adrenal glands that's on top of each kidney becomes exhausted. Because
that's
the
what they talked
caffeine
about.
stimulates
And,
the release of
and that's where the liver comes in, because there's
the pancreas.
They talk. Well, no, the liver comes in that they see there's a correlation between, or they've been able to make some sort of connection between the deposit of fat in liver happening because the body is not processing sugar, and that's what leads to diabetes. And so these are great articles, and so is the article written by Gary Taubes for the New York Times. It's, there's the negative effects of having sugar, period, but it seemed to be
and diabetes
worse. It seemed to be worse with the artificial sweeteners. They obviously use mice, and the whole thing with drinking water, and the ones that just had, drank sugar water didn't have as high a blood sugar level. So that tells you that the body is not processing artificial sweeteners properly, and that's already a great reason to stop using them. And I don't know what you tell diabetics other than that they have to actually cut out sugar. They should cut out sugar, obviously, but they really have to watch their carbs. I went to the doctor recently, and she told me you're pre-diabetes.
Pre-diabetic, right.
Right, and you should watch your carbs.
Okay.
She didn't say watch the sugar, but obviously, if I'm looking at my carbs, is to look at also to curtail my sugar. Sugar is addictive. I'm having a hard time. I could stop eating certain things, but sugar is tough. And as I complained about earlier, it's in a lot of foods
that we don't suspect.
So it's like, how do I navigate, the food choices that are in front of me, and I don't have unlimited choices. I can't run off to a health food store and keep getting shakes and smoothies that fall within whatever's being recommended.
And go back to the natural sugars like organic honeys. There's different types of organic honeys that's made by Mother Nature, and that sugar is natural. But then again, some diabetic people have been told not to use even natural sugar because that will upset their metabolism. But I wonder
if their metabolism is already upset from the artificial sweeteners.
Definitely.
That's what these articles are emphasizing. And if you've been taking that for so long, you find yourself with the disturbance of your metabolism. They used the rats as an example, and then they tried it on humans, and they could detect that the body changes the way it metabolizes the sugar when you go back. And so so there is a real problem. Now, before we end the show, we want to mention some alternatives, at least for beverages. There's been a few articles that I've been fortunate to come across for drinking. For beverages, basically water, good drinking water that we've covered in other shows, preferably alkaline water, seltzer water. You can add, if you're tired of just drinking bubbles, you can add fruit juices to it, but then make the mix more seltzer water than the fruit juice to cut down on the sugar. Most teas are good. There's some fruity teas that might have some natural sugar in there, but they do recommend green tea, which has a lot of benefits to it. And so just stick to the teas that are unsweetened. I want to mention sugar in the news. I mean, it's always in the news, but recently Pepsi mentioned that it will be manufacturing reduced sugar soda. And as a test, they're only going to sell it through Amazon.
Oh, okay.
I guess they don't want to spend the money on the whatever the technology it is, and don't want to invest too much in it and have it in the stores and have it go flat, and then have to backtrack on doing something like that. And So
A can
before,
of soda, I mean, it's just loaded and loaded and loaded with sugar, the
right.
synthetic sugar.
And you know, we can make our own soda at home, folks, if you must have soda. And a better item to use than even regular sugar would be stevia, because you can use less of it and it has no calories.
Exactly.
Stevia, Stevia. Some of you might see it in the supermarket and keep going, and you go to the refined sugar that's on the bottom shelf. That probably costs a little bit less, or you get more of it, and people seem to be into volume these days. But it doesn't add calories, and it's derived from a plant. That's what makes it so special. So stevia, and you can check out at stevia.com if you want information on how they make that and where it's available. It is available in the supermarkets, and usually in packets, or it's in a small box, but we can make our own at home.
And it's non-toxic and non-addictive.
Which is
Whereas sugar, especially synthetic artificial sugar, is very addictive and toxic.
right, and for people who want a little guidance on detoxing from sugar, Mark Hyman is a doctor who wrote a book called The Blood Sugar Solution, 10-Day Detox Diet. We're killing ourselves by consuming truckloads of hidden sugar, he says, and being addicted to sugar and flour is not an emotional eating disorder. It's a biological disorder, and it's driven by hormones and what we've already been conditioned to eat. So, folks, I'm going to leave you with that. You want more information on being able to break the habit of sugar? There's a book by Mark Hyman, doctor who wrote The Blood Sugar Solution, 10-Day Detox Diet. I'm Debbie Givens for A Better Day, A Better Life. My co-host has been Paul Ortiz.
Thank you.
Paul, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
And discussing sugar with me. We hope that we've given you enough information to help you have a better day and live a better life. Thanks for watching.